Good morning, English literature students. Today we shall be discussing the main figures of speech which generally are used in your poetry. Okay, as since past so many days I have been discussing poems with you. So in most of the poems you are finding figures speech, so these basic terms you have to know. So that is a figurative language which is being used by the poet, and so it's very necessary, essential part of your poem. Okay, so I have given you wide notes on it, so I'll just read out those things. A figure of speech is a word or phrase using figurative language that has other meaning than its normal definition. In other words, figures of speech rely on implied or suggested meaning rather than a dictionary definition. We express and develop them through hundreds of different rhetorical techniques. Figures of speech are also known as, rhetorical techniques. Like, generally we refer to simile, we refer to metaphor, we refer to personification, we refer to irony. Okay, so there are so synecdoche, okay, metonymy. So there are so many terms, and I will discuss each and every one, and as you can relate it to your poetry as I have discussed. So I have given you many examples. Okay, so we express and develop them through hundreds of different rhetorical techniques, from specific types like metaphors and similes to more general forms like sarcasm and slang. Now, see, students, these notes, I have taken these notes. The help, it has been taken from literary.net and also from thought.co. Okay, so you can follow these, what you say, websites. Okay, now, figures of speech make up a huge portion of the English language. It makes it more creative. So, figures of speech, it doesn't mean that it is only used in poetry, but it is also used in prose, it is used in drama. So, you will find use of it in many places. So, it makes a huge portion of the English language. It makes it more creative, more expressive, and just more interesting. Yes, why do you want to read, a piece of literature again and again? Because it is full of figures of speech. So it makes it very, what you say, rich in language. Many have been around for hundreds of years, some even thousands, and more are added to our language essentially every day. So this particular note, it focuses on the figures of speech. Okay, now see, because it is very essential, that is why to understand your poem you need to understand these figures of speech. It's one of the basic things when you are discussing poem. Like, alliteration, use of alliteration you have often seen in the sonnets of Shakespeare. Okay, I have make you mark those alliterations. So I will just here give you the definition of alliteration. Alliteration is the repetition of an initial consonant sound in any any piece of poem, in any piece. Mainly it is used in piece of poem. Like, for example, I cite an example here. She sells seashells by the seashore. So you can see the repetition of SSS. Okay, so this is known as alliteration. You see the first alphabet of each word, that is SSS, and it adds even to the rhythm of the poem. Okay, now come to the second figure of speech, that is anaphora. So the repetition of the same word or phrase at the beginning of successive clauses or verses. So the example is, unfortunately, I was in the wrong place at the wrong time on the wrong day. Okay, so this is what. Now come to the antithesis, which is often used in poems. Okay, that is the juxtaposition of contrasting ideas in balanced phrases. For example, Abraham Lincoln said, folks who have no vices have very few virtues. So here, vices and virtues. Okay, now this picture is quite interesting. top figures of speech. For example, personification. Time sure runs quick, so time is being personified here. Oxymoron is, it's the beginning of the end for us, ain't it? Then metonymy, I'm all ears, okay? Simile is as fast as an arrow, as and like is used. You have often found it in the poems of, Shakespeare, John Donne, Milton, okay? So, hyperbole is when you are going on exaggerating, yet talking me to death, Jane, okay? Now come to the fourth figure of speech, that is apostrophe. Apostrophe is directly addressing a non existent person or an inanimate object, though it were a living being. For example, oh, you stupid car, you never work when I need you to. Bird side. So here you are addressing a non existent person or inanimate object as though it is a living being. Okay? So this fellow is referring to the car as a stupid car. So this is an example of apostrophe. Okay. Now come to assonance, the fifth figure of speech. Students, here I am discussing, there are many more figures of speech, but I am discussing the 20 figures of speech which are quite prominent and which keep on repeating in your piece of literature. Okay. Now come to the fifth figure of speech, that is assonance. Assonance is the identity or similarity between internal vowels in neighboring words. How now, brown cow. Okay. Now come to the sixth figure of speech. Come to the seventh one, euphemism. Okay. Euphemism, the substitution of an inoffensive term for one considered offensively explicit. For example, we are teaching our toddler how to go potty. Okay, Bob said. So you can understand this. Okay, so you are substituting inoffensive term. Okay, that you must have understood. Now come to hyperbole. Hyperbole is an extravagant statement when you go on exaggerating. So the use of exaggerated terms for the purpose of emphasis or heightened effect. It is generally used in different piece of literature in different style. Okay. For example, here I give you example. I have a ton of things to do when I get home. So ton of things. Okay. Now come to irony. Now come to the ninth figure of speech, that is irony. Irony is the use of words to convey the opposite of their literal meaning. Also a statement or situation where the meaning is contradicted by the appearance or presentation of the idea. For example, oh, I love spending big bucks, said my dad, a notorious penny pincher. So here irony, because sarcasm is done. One who never spends bucks is saying, I love spending big bucks. Suppose I give you one more example. There is a man who is highly dishonest, okay, in terms of his monetary affairs. And I say, oh, this man is, he's very honest. So this is an irony. When the literal meaning, when the in-depth meaning is opposite to the literal meaning. Okay, irony is often used in prose. Now, come to 11, that is metaphor, which is quite commonly, I have cited so many examples when I was teaching you poetry. Okay, so just telling you what is a metaphor. Metaphor is an implied comparison between two dissimilar things that have something in common. For example, all the world's a stage. Okay. Now come to metonymy, a figure of speech in which a word or phrase is substituted for another with which it is closely associated. Also the rhetorical strategy of describing something indirectly by referring to things around it. For example, that stuffed suit with the briefcase is a poor excuse for a salesman, the manager said angrily. Now come to the 13th figure of speech, that is onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia is the use of words that imitate the sounds associated with the objects or action they refer to. Now come to 14th Oxymoron is a figure of speech in which incongruous or contradictory terms appear side by side. He popped the jumbo shrimp in his mouth. Now, paradox is a statement that appears to contradict itself. For example, this is the beginning of the end. Now, come to personification. It is a figure of speech in which an inanimate object or abstraction is endued with human qualities or abilities. That kitchen knife will take a bite out of your hand if you don't handle it safely. So knife is being personified. Now come to the 17th one, that is a pun. Pun is a play on words or a word having double meaning, word having two meanings, sometimes on different senses of the same word and sometimes on the similar sense or sound of different words. For example, Jessie looked up from her breakfast and said, a boiled egg every morning is hard to beat. Now come to simile, which is the most common figure of speech used by the poets. So a simile is a stated comparison usually formed with like or as between two fundamentally dissimilar things that have certain qualities in common. So here I give you an example. You say that girl is beautiful, so you say the girl is as beautiful as Rose. Okay, so the second example is Roberto was white as a sheet after he walked out of the horror movie. Okay, so something is being compared. So two dissimilar things are being compared. Okay, now come to synecdoche, a figure of speech in which a part is used to represent the whole. For example, Tina is learning her ABCs in preschool. Now, ABC, okay, that is the part which represents the whole. Now, come to the 20th figure of speech, okay, that is understatement. It is a figure of speech in which a writer or speaker deliberately makes a situation seem less important or serious than it is. For example, you could say, Babe Ruth was a decent ball player, the reporter said with a wink. So students, you must have followed this particular lecture and you must have taken a lot of interest because this is the basic which you have to learn for your poem. Okay, the required basics for your literature. So thank you students, thank you for your patience.